talk about historical collective trauma and how to challenge the Western medical model. The picture that you see is San Miguel, the small town my mother is from. We're from El Salvador and we both immigrated back in 2006. Historical and collective trauma, to me, is trauma that is experienced by certain groups, such as persecuted groups throughout history, indigenous people, Holocaust survivors, descendants of the Atlantic slave trade. When you hear the word PTSD, oftentimes we think about shell-shocked soldiers, and they also experience collective trauma. But we also don't talk about how there's a high percentage of PTSD both in people of color and women due to the difficulties they experience for being a person of color or of a different gender. The Western model doesn't address things such as that, as trauma is still seen as individual responsibility and individual healing. This is Antistatica, a way to celebrate Purim in disguise, crypto Jews who were forced to convert to Catholicism by Isabel, or face death, or face expulsion. So they decided to come up with their own holiday to be able to celebrate Purim regardless. This is a woman up in the mountains in El Salvador during the Civil War from 1980 to 1982. In it, this woman says so much and says also so little. I chose this picture that even though it is a picture of the Salvadorian Civil War, this woman can be placed in various times in history during there have been atrocities committed for civil wars or wars between countries or invasions. So I want to point out that it's not a unique trait and that this is, again, a large percentage of our population, if not all, to experience collective grief, collective trauma. It can be historical. Collective. This is my family. They lived during the Civil War. It was during my mom's formative years. She's the one in the back. And that's my cousin. He's the only one out of all of our cousins who was born before the end of the war. And the Salvadorian Civil War had to do with this class war. There's always been and continues to be high income inequality. There's a lot of campesinos, rural poor farmers who farm coffee, but it's sold at a higher price. They do not get that wage and continue to be exploited. This broke out into the war, and my family experienced a lot of pain due to it. And then it's a phantom that still haunts the country. But the reason I remember is due to oral history from my mom often telling me stories about war, really sometimes without any prompting or explanation, or my cousin, due to his Jesuit upbringing, and remembering Monsignor Romero and the nurses killed because the U.S. By the right-wing government of El Salvador back in the United States. Because of this, when there was for some of us, coup d'etat in Bolivia, possibly to extract resources such as lithium, which is used in car batteries and cell phone batteries and in computers, which I'm holding one right now, and medicine. But as countries start to nationalize, sometimes leaders are overthrown and the richer divide within Bolivia might claim dictatorship, and that's not the case. Evo Morales, it was a man who defended the indigenous rights in Latin America and in a place of so much forgotten history. He was a very important man to keep history and legacy going. But there was a coup d'etat, and a lot of it is suspicious to be due to the large lithium fields Bolivia have. post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, childhood trauma. This is The Scream by Edvard Munch. It's very fitting not only for these elements, but during an epidemic. A lot of people believe that orange is due that in about the 1800s, Krakatoa exploded, and many people, like us, had to stay inside. And the sky was this red color for a while, but that's only one of the theories. And again, it's a perfect example of as I bring all those labels and medical diagnosis. All of these do not mention what, as a collective, do we go through? What is the treatment? Why are you upset about a war that's not here, or about a war that you didn't see? Well, it's not only adaptive learning, it's also in our genetics. It's a quite new subject, but epigenetics are arguing that trauma is not only acquired learning through our parents, but also possibilities that trauma itself can be embedded in your genes and they can change the chemical structure, making it easier for trauma and anxiety to be passed down from generation to generation. And this also could explain why certain groups of people are more susceptible for certain diseases. And it's just now that we're paying attention to the genetics and the collective of trauma on a certain amount of people. But it's still always remembering trauma as an individual experience in which a person is responsible for their own healing. We are failing many, many groups, many of us. This is me, and I'm not a singer. It was a collective healing. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of different work. For me, it was the idea of making scenes, reconstructing documents from the Civil War in El Salvador to create my own installation called Disco is In and War is Over. There's that. There's different art therapy. There's different things. There's things together in collective healing that can finally challenge a model that is leaving us behind. Thank you. This is in San Salvador, and I really appreciate you all listening to my talk on collective and historical trauma. Thank you.